Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are calling in from. Welcome to this webinar on forced displacement. Following on from the discussions on localization, on climate change and on conflict, this webinar on forced displacement is the next in GNDR's Local Leadership Academy series. We're joined today by Shivangi Chavda of GNDR, Jean Dedu Masingamana, Omkala, Nisa Sursa, and BJ Opare, who are GNDR members supporting displaced communities in Nepal, and also by Sylvie Losa, a representative from Norwegian Refugee Council. So very warm welcome to our panelists. We hope through this seminar to highlight key actions that can be taken to ensure that those at risk of displacement are central to decisions made about preparedness, response, and seeking long-term and durable solutions to the risks that they face. As well as hearing directly from the CSOs involved in addressing forced displacement, we hope that you will learn more about the tools and resources available. And this includes an e-learning opportunity on disaster displacement developed by the Platform on Disaster Displacement and the Norwegian Refugee Council. We hope these discussions today and the tools will support you in your own actions to support displaced communities. So to start proceedings, I'm delighted to welcome Shivangi Chavda to give some opening remarks. She is the Senior Regional Lead for Asia and Europe at GNDR. She spent almost 20 years working in this sector and has contributed to humanitarian disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation across Asia. As Senior Lead at GNDR, she's responsible for membership engagement, networking, capacity building, and leading global projects. Her portfolio includes action-based research work, program implementation, networking, fundraising, and advocacy. And she is the Global Risk Driver Lead on food and water insecurity from GNDR. Following Shivangi's opening remarks, we're going to play you a short film by a GNDR member in Indonesia. But first, Shivangi, over to you. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Alice, and very happy to welcome you all again for the webinar today, and privileged to be with all of you. Great learning opportunity as I see as we move forward. Today's topic, forced displacement, we know that it is on rise. In 2020, we have seen conflicts and disasters which trigger almost 40 million new internal displacements across 149 countries and territories, into a total of 55 million internally displaced people across the world. 48 million have been displaced by conflict and violence, and 7 million as a result of disaster, as per the Global Report on Internal Displacement. UNHCR has reported that approximately 26 million people are refugees. Alongside other categorized as asylum seekers, it is thought that over 80 million people have been forced to leave their homes and places of habitats to become internally displaced people, refugees and asylum seekers because of climate change, disasters and conflict. And I think we know the recent scenarios, which, for example, like Ethiopia, we have Myanmar, we have Afghanistan. These are some of the examples, and these are the countries where we see that the forced displacement is currently prevailing in high numbers. GNDR members have identified forced displacement as a key risk driver. This is because their experience with the communities most at risk of displacement in its aftermath shows that the displacement is not resolved quickly. With the length of more than 20 years, it is critical that that not only the short-term needs of displaced people are met through humanitarian aid or relief, but also they are able to build longer-term resilience. As displaced persons move towards urban and informal settlement, instead of safety, improve standards of living and livelihoods. Often they go on the cycle of vulnerability, what we actually term as like a vicious circle of poverty. There are multiple risk factors, include underlying stresses that causes displacement and hinder durable solutions for those affected. Through GNDR's flagship program, Making Displacement Safer, which is funded by USAID, members in 11 countries, some of them you will hear today, are locally led DRR solutions for displaced population in urban areas. And they have gathered the perception of this risk faced by over 4,900 displaced people. 69% of those interviewed have mentioned that they continue to be affected by disasters year after the initial event which had forced them away from their home. And biggest perceived risk is the lack of access of basic services, followed by flash floods and poverty. Also concerning is that 2/3 of them have responded that they are not at all consulted in the planning processes, in assessments, and other activities to reduce risk or climate change adaptation measures, nor they are given access to the financial resources, information, and to help them reduce the risk. So anecdotally, several displaced persons, especially women, have refrained from engaging in the discussion of the policy environment, highlighting their confidence or willingness to speak into the issue for fear of reprisal. These findings from Making Displacement Safer and show there is a long way to go before achieving the targets set out in the Global Compact for Migration. Set up by the United Nations, it seeks safe, orderly, and regular migration and aims to, 1, mitigate the adverse drivers and structural factors that hinder people from building and maintaining sustainable livelihoods in their countries of origin, reduce risks and vulnerabilities migrants face at different stages of migrants by respecting, protecting, and fulfilling human rights and providing them with care and assistance. And third, create conducive conditions that enable all migrants to enrich our societies through their human, economic, and social capacities, and thus facilitate their contributions to sustainable development at the local, national, regional, and global levels. This will only be achieved if local communities, including displaced people, are enabled to participate, influence, and make decisions on risk-informed development policies and practices, because these communities are most at risk. They have critical knowledge and experience of the threats that they face and their consequences. Whether it is disaster, housing, social welfare, education, health, and land rights, employment, or legal identification policies, the voices of displaced must be heard and acted upon as these policies are developed, implemented, and reviewed. Today is the first step in what GNDR can do it to make this happen. We hope you learn a lot from the experiences of our members, the tools shared, and are inspired to further collaborate with displaced persons in your community. With this, I stop and I wish all of you all the best, all the panelists, and also I will be kind of learning in this journey today. Thank you so much.
As a country that is prone to disasters, Indonesia has experienced fluctuating numbers of internally displaced persons in the last decade. The flash flood in September 2016 affected 6 sub-districts. More than 2,500 houses were damaged, and roughly 2,500 people were displaced from their homes. The local government decided to relocate those affected to 10 different locations in the periphery of Garut Kota sub-district, which are far from the city center and have minimal access to economic activities and basic facilities.
Jam 11 kirang 20 menit eta nu paling dahsyat nu paling ageng.
Sakieu anu tos kekalelepan. Lan abi ieu pabelit sareng ieu tangkal sukun sampean. Mun teu pabelit mah abi bakal teu aya meureun. Dugi ka bumi Abi lumayan nyerai teu aya sareng carogena murang kalina kena nangis.
Disasters cause the displaced communities to be more vulnerable, and efforts are needed to make the displacement safer for the displaced community. Making displacement safer is a project to seek locally led disaster risk reduction solutions to challenges faced by the displaced communities to increase understanding and innovative approaches. One of the activities in this project is called Urban Living Labs, an approach to formulate durable solutions for the displaced population in Garut, which aligns with the Words into Action guideline.
Kenalan apa yang penuh transportasi nu janten bingung teh teu gaduh kendaraan nyalira teu gaduh kendaraan teh tebih pacabakan kitu janten tebih wae nama
Alih kali teh sedih biasa abah ditu walaupun abah tukang kuli walaupun abah tukang beburuh 15.000 20.000 katuang ai keayaan dia mah jang lapur kangge ongkos ge teu cekap bager abah teh kitu.
Hoyong misalkan di dieu teh nya tiasa sapertos deui semula painten gitu.
Harapan kapayon mah gaduh modal teh hoyong nyana pemuda-pemuda nu ngalangur hoyong di daramal di dieu we kajen sakedik sewang lah rezeki mah.
Therefore, it is our responsibility to strengthen and mainstream the words into action and the localized approach to find durable solutions for displaced communities.
So we've just heard there a great call to action from displaced persons themselves and a great example of how a GNDR member is ensuring that those displaced communities are part of their own resilience building. And to unpack some of the common issues associated with displacement, we have invited to our panel today staff from the National Society for the Earthquake Technology, NSET. They're a GNDR member based in Nepal. Their story highlights how it is vital to ensure the participation of displaced persons in research and data collection and helping to ensure strong relationships so that ownership and inclusion are central to any of the decisions made. NSET is a multidisciplinary professional society and a non-profit organisation working on disaster risk reduction with that special focus on earthquake risk management. It was established with the vision of earthquake-safe communities in Nepal by 2020, and its mission is to assist all communities in Nepal to become earthquake-safe by developing and implementing organised approaches to managing and minimising earthquake risk. NSET has been supporting the government of Nepal at all levels in formulating policies, plans and guidelines related to disaster risk reduction and facilitating the communities in implementing the plans and policies related to disaster risk reduction. They're currently supporting 50 municipalities in implementing national building codes, urban regeneration, retrofitting of schools and buildings affected by the recent Gorkha earthquake, and developing local disaster and climate resilient plans. So joining us first of all is Ms. Omkala Kanal. She's their Social Development Officer and has been working since January 2009 for their community-based disaster risk management division. She works as a lead trainer for CBDRM and also trains in basic emergency medical response, community search and rescues in different districts, municipalities and village district committees of Nepal under the Nepal Earthquake Risk Management Project. And with GNDR, she's managed Views from the Frontline and also this Making Displacement Safer project. She'll be joined later in the seminar by two of her colleagues. But first of all, Ms. Omkala, thank you so much for joining us today. the floor is yours for your presentation. Ella, have you got the screen? Excellent. Omkala, over to you. We can't hear you if you just unmute your mic.
Yeah.
Great, we can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am Omkala Khanal. I am from NSET, Nepal. Today, I am going to make a brief presentation, reflection regarding the Making Displacement Safer project. In Nepal, most of the disaster displaced communities are only outside the Kathmandu Valley. Currently, more than 50 squatters settlements exist in Kathmandu Valley. Next slide, Alice, please. A small community of Kathmandu is selected for MDS, Making Displacement Safer project, namely Namuna Atoll. Yeah, the squatter are displaced due to multiple reasons. Some of them have been displaced due to disaster and conflict. Namuna Atoll has evacuated to set up armed police force camp from the first settlement area and relocated in existing Namuna Atoll. Yeah. This community is located in between Bagmati River and road. Yeah. We collaborated with mapping map action for the mapping work. The settlement image clearly shows the changing river morphology between December 2019 to May 2021 near IDP settlement in Kathmandu Valley. Yeah. Yeah, views from frontline survey result shows poor economic community. Views from frontline surveys result shows poor economic condition was the main cause of displacement of MDS settlement, and disaster was second cause. And third, likewise, the VFL survey result shows flash flood as the most significant threats, and second threat was poor sanitation facilities and earthquake. Yeah, we have continued for focus group discussion. The result of FGD found electrocution, fire, and flood as the major threats. Likewise, cause of displacement are disintegration of families, breakup and divorce, alcoholism, exploitation, violence against women, bound to work at the early age, which enable them to continue their study. Yeah. Flash flood had occurred on September 6, 2021. It was the unexpected flash flood in the early morning. Community was very panicked because of lack of assessment and preparedness, and decided to act after receiving notice from the community. Community was able to prepare the list of the most affected families are in community and provided us details within 27 hours. Yeah, it took and said some time to fulfill the process, such as getting an approval from local authorities, which delayed the immediate response. And it was able to provide necessary food and non-food item to the affected communities after 7. And so through this MDS project supported the affected community and said, yeah. In the picture, yeah, we go back on slide, please. Yeah. In these pictures, we can see the flash flood has calmed down and the settlement was out of danger. Another picture as family members of the flooded house were busy in the pouring the water out of the floor, and one of the houses had used a jet pump to drive the water from inside. Others were busy in cleaning and drying the floor and carpet, bed, clothing. Yeah, the key issues. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, and the key issues we learned from the project, which need to be addressed, are legal status. Displaced people from the community are deprived of basic services due to the lack of legal status. Yeah, the community is vulnerable to seasonal flood. It is as it is located in between Bagmati River and road. Unplanned settlement in public property. Community has poor infrastructure and lifeline services. Reshuffling was during units due to construction of river embankment. Yeah, currently uncertainty of living is continued. In the next phase of our survey, we will cover the areas such as has the displacement really been beneficial as they thought, and what happens if they return to their original location, and also find out the most common realistic acceptable solution. Yeah, now I would like to stop here. Thank you for your kind attention. Suggestion, question, and feedback are more welcome. Over to you, Alice.
Thank you so much, Carla. It was really great to hear a little bit about the experience of your work with that displaced community in Kathmandu. And thank you for highlighting the challenges of ongoing disaster and risk that communities who are displaced face. Our research globally highlighted that 69% of the displaced persons we surveyed felt that they were still affected by disasters years after their initial displacement trigger, or the event that calls them to move away from home. So thank you so much for sharing the reality of those risks. And as you said, if there are any questions, please do put them in the chat box and we'll come back to them in the panel. The presentation from Nepal highlighted some tools, the mapping, the views from the frontline surveys, and the focus group discussions, and we wanted to highlight them as examples of tools that help us to work with displaced communities. And as well as working with communities to collect the data, it's also important to work with communities towards durable solutions. So whether communities are at risk of displacement or whether they are already displaced, and continue to face significant risks because of their displacement status. We must work towards those durable solutions. So I'm delighted to now welcome Jean de Dieu to the panel. He comes from an organization called Mana Disaster in Rwanda, and they've been working with communities in Kigali, the capital city, to further explore these durable solutions. So I welcome Jean de Dieu to the panel. He's GNDR's national focal point for Rwanda. He's a disaster recovery officer and legal representative, and with a goal of disaster risk reduction and community resilience through community partnership in all his work. He's been working with communities to improve their livelihoods over the last 10 years and has been encouraged by some of the positive impact that he's seen in more than 15 communities in that time. So welcome, Jean de Dieu, to the panel. The floor is yours.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are seated. And I'm happy to be presenting on behalf of GNDR and the Mana disaster in Rwanda, and being able to speak on making the displacement safer project. And very happy to highlight some of the have been carried out in the two communities of Kigali, which are Gisasa and Kangondo and Kigali city. So we started early January, and we did the surveys, we did focus group discussions, we did interviews, we interacted with displaced communities. So at the picture you are seeing there are actually two communities where you see very concentrated. These are displaced community members who came there from different parts of the country as a result of several causes. But mostly several times they've been saying that disaster and conflicts and the extreme poverty are the main causes of being displaced. And
Jean, could you just turn your camera off? There's just a challenge with the sound. Thank you. Continue.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
yes,
perfect.
I did. Yeah. So one of the very good. One of the biggest challenges that we found out in these two communities were extreme poverty. Sorry, slide. Yeah. Sanitation problems, erosion, which are causing house destructions, lack of shelters and accommodation, lack of basic services like education, health, insurance, food and water, the exclusion challenges when it comes to the policy design and the development plans, lack of DRR information and awareness. The next slide. And during the course of implementing this MDS project, we have mapped out stakeholders involved. The first one were just displaced community members, community-based organization representing just the displaced persons, community-based organizations, that one said representing other persons at risk in the city, local government representatives from academia, researchers, students to support research, and teachers from community schools, NGOs, and of course, private sector. We go to the next slide. So the achievement the stakeholders is that recognize the local context, understand the community perspectives on risk, collaborate and map out partners to work with across all groups, and levers to pursue the interest most at risk. We ensured participatory way and transformative approach. We analyzed different disaster risk reduction policies, and we held several events regarding urban living labs with all the groups of people and bring together all stakeholders to come together with displaced community, so that we together we brainstorm, we innovate by designing, developing, and testing a solution. And of course, the ongoing plans are we're now at the stage of course, we have been able to identify the challenges, and some of the challenges have been prioritized and solutions have been identified. So some of those solutions identified are down trenches and tree plantation alongside. Stress community training on environmental conservation and water harvesting. These are some of the solutions that have been identified and we are implementing them. Domestic gardening and greening at nursery schools in the uniform. As you said, we organize several events and regarding the urban living labs. Some of the participants were teachers from schools in the displaced communities, and they brought in some of the different ideas, and all of them have been considered when we identified the solutions. So the implementation process of these selected solutions will be carried out by all project participants.
I think, unfortunately, we've just lost Sean. Apologies if there was a sound challenge. He was just explaining on this last slide that you'll see on the screen, the ongoing plan. So after that urban living labs process, where he's highlighted the different stakeholders that were brought together to share and learn together and come up with solutions. Here are the solutions that they have come with, and he states that the implementation process of these selected solutions will be carried out by all project participants, including displaced community members, who will directly benefit from being employed in the digging of trenches, tree plantations, gardening and greening, as well as nursery children and vulnerable from vulnerable poor families will now also be able to get some uniforms and toys as a way for them to encourage, as a way to encourage them to enjoy their education. So it's some of the solutions that the displaced themselves in Kigali came up with to help. And so some of the ongoing challenges that Jean was highlighting, I think he's joined us now, great. Could you just highlight your ongoing challenges?
Oh, thank you very much. That was the internet connectivity. Sorry, very sorry. So, like I said, we participatory and inclusively engaged more stakeholders and came out with different identified solutions. So, like we said in the beginning, there is a lot of challenges. So, what the participants were suggesting, they've been saying, what should be added to the prioritized solutions? Because the challenges are many. So, we have selected some of them. What should be prioritized, like when it comes to that we have maybe another donor or we have some more funds, what should be other solutions that can be prioritized? So as a way of scalability, if we can be able to scale, what the challenges can be identified and be able to address.
John, the line is quite bad, so I'll just pause you there.
To address, and because the displacement isn't. Thank you very much, and
thank you. I think the final comment was the scalability of the challenges. When challenges are many or there's more and more displaced people arriving in the same location, how do we continue to build their resilience? Thank you, Jean, for your reflections. I now want to
thank you very
go
much.
Straight to Sylvie Losa and invite her to the panel. She's an independent consultant working to support the project led by the Norwegian Refugee Council, and it's called Words into Action, which gives guidance on disaster displacement. She is a co-developer and writing of the Words into Action guide, a checklist that accompanies it, and an e-learning course that she will present to us now. She's been a very good friend to GNDR and incredibly supportive of the journey that we've taken over the last year to understand and learn more about displacement ourselves. So I want to take the opportunity first to thank her for what she's done to support our members and include some of them in ongoing advocacy opportunities, which is great. But secondly, I'd like to invite her to the floor and she will give a presentation on some of those tools and e-learning resources available. Thank you, Sylvie.
Thank you, Elise. I am very pleased to be here with you. If I can have my presentation on the screen, please, that would be great. Super. Thank you very much. So as Elise mentioned, I would like to tell you a little bit about this Words into Action guideline that was published by UNDRR. It's called Disaster Displacement: How to Reduce Risk, Address Impacts, and Strengthen Resilience. And the family of tools, we call it a family because they're very much linked, that includes the checklist and the e-learning. Next, please. The Words into Action guideline was launched in May 2019 by UNDRR, the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. And it was part of a collaborative effort by an expert working group that included experts from disaster risk reduction and, very importantly, from the disaster displacement area. It was supported by the governments of Germany, Norway, and Switzerland. Next, please. The Words into Action guideline on disaster displacement offers practical guidance to reduce displacement risk, to protect the rights of displaced people, and to help displaced people find durable solutions. So that means that they no longer have any needs related to their displacement. The guide includes background information because it is it's geared to a disaster risk reduction audience and practitioners. And therefore, we understand that not everybody knows already about disaster displacement. So there's a lot of emphasis on providing you those resources so you know where to look. There are examples from what's available out in the world in different regions and in particular countries. And there are references, of course, to disaster displacement concepts, because disaster displacement is one aspect of human mobility. The way that it's organized is according to the 4 priorities of the Sendai framework. So I'm not going to go into detail about any of these, but I just want to give you a flavor of what is in the guide and hopefully encourage your curiosity to go take a look. So for the first priority of Sendai, which is understanding risk, we want to understand disaster displacement risk, and we want to understand what's normally happening in the country, the area that you're in, by collecting data of mobility in normal times. Where do people go? Where do they have friends? Where do they have family? Where do they go for jobs? All of these things are a predictor of where they will go when a disaster strikes. We want to know who they are, who is displaced when a disaster has just happened, because that way we can make sure that we're serving their needs. What is the percentage of children that are involved? They have specific needs. Of elderly people, do people have mobility issues? How can we make sure that resources are getting to them? And after the disaster, and as was mentioned in the initial presentation, disaster displacement unfortunately lasts a long time for many, many people. And so we're not talking about, while the emergency is still declared, but we're talking for years and years afterwards, people may still have needs related to their displacement. So we want to make sure that we can support them all the way through until they find a durable solution. In terms of strengthening governance to address disaster displacement risk, we would like to see in existing laws, policies, and strategies the mention of disaster displacement. The big surprise is that it's often not there. We know that disaster displacement is a very typical consequence of disasters, and yet when you look in disaster risk reduction legislation, it's not even mentioned. So it would be great to include that and to encourage, as civil society, to encourage local government and national government, of course, to include displacement, displaced people, put those words in there, make them visible. And then in terms of how we organize ourselves, we need a system. So we need a focal point that can work across the different departments of the municipality, for example, or if we're talking at national level, that can work across the government and interact with us, civil society. Then we move on to priority 3, which is investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience to reduce displacement. And here, just to pick one example, we can refocus existing programs that we might have to build resilience to displaced people. So we don't have to necessarily invent something new, but we have to make sure that people that have been displaced are actually included, that they know about it, that they are learning about risks in the new place that they have been displaced to, for example. Then under the 4th priority, there is quite a lot because it includes preparedness and response, recovery, etc. And so there are many things that need to be done, but one of them, and the most important one, and I know that I'm speaking to a converted audience, but we need to engage displaced people and those that are at risk of displacement in planning. So in planning how it is, when I was watching the video from RDI in Indonesia, I was thinking about the government. Did the government ask people? I was wondering, did the government ask people, would you like to go to this place or that place? They were sent to 10 different sites. Were they consulted about this? I wonder. Were they consulted about which one of those houses they were going to be next to, who were their neighbors going to be? I mean, they had an existing community and now they're dispersed. I'm just picking up on that one example that we all saw, but this happens constantly, that government has makes available services that in fact are not necessarily what people immediately need. So We took all the actionable items from the guideline and put them into a checklist format. Next, please. And so you can see on the right part of the screen that there is a list. So for every issue, for example, this one is support resilience of displaced people and host populations. And some there are items that you can check and see, well, does my area, do we have this or do we not have this? Is this something we should be advocating for? Is this something that my NGO can fulfill? And the structure, therefore, is not the Sendai of priorities, but the disaster risk management cycle. So from understanding to strengthening the governance, preparing, responding, and all the way to finding durable solutions. And now we have also developed, in addition to the checklist, an e-learning course. It takes about 4 to 5 hours to complete, and some of your colleagues already participated in it, and they can tell you about it, so you don't have to take my word for it, but it's very interactive. It's pretty fun. There are scenarios and exercises. It's available right now in English and Spanish, and it's also, by the end of this month, it will be available in French, by the beginning of the next year in Arabic. And it is already available both online and offline. So here's just some examples of what the e-learning is like. So you are part of a team. You have to advise by listening to your colleagues. They give suggestions, and then you help make decisions about what should be done first. You know, you have to listen to displaced people by clicking on their points of view. And then at the end, you get to be the decision maker and to help make decisions to relocate people where they will have services available to them and they will have jobs for them. So we have been offering these tools to organizations and governments. The governments that have been using it this year are Chile, South Africa, Mozambique, and Nepal. And we have also offered a training course to IGAD, so the Greater Horn of Africa, the Andean region, and the Central American region. And as I mentioned, your partners here at GNDR. And so I would leave you with this slide that shows you where you can find the publications. Both the guide and the checklist are in the UNDRR's website. You can also find it in the NRC website, but this is the main site. And then you can check it out on the e-learning course on the kayaconnect.org. And if you are interested in technical support or in training, you may contact my boss, Nina Birkeland at nrc.no. And I'm very happy to take questions when we come to that. Thank you.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Sylvie, and thank you to all the panelists for presenting. We have 10 minutes or so left. Apologies, we wanted to get a few more minutes in, but we've got 10 minutes for question and answers. I think I want to ask BJ from NSET if he could answer our first question. It's been indicated across the presentations about getting involved with local authorities. There's a question, could you highlight the problem of legal status and the inability to access services? What do people, or what do displaced people need to ask? BJ from NSET, would you be able to answer that question briefly?
Thank you, Alice. Welcome, everybody. Am I audible?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the thing is, I'm not sure whether I'll be able to completely satisfy the query, but I can just tell you my experience in Nepal. The thing is that most of these displaced population who live in public land, as Omkala has already presented you, it is a kind of encroachment of a public land. So it is in a way illegal, but the government has not been able to shift them elsewhere or drive them elsewhere because they are illegal on the human ground. And still the lack of policy in handling these type of people. Well, they have the international policy on refugees, which we also have. Like we had displaced population from Bhutan, from Tibet, or nowadays from Rohingya as well, but not so much clear about the internally displaced population. And that is why it is very difficult for the local government to handle these people, because they know that on the humanitarian ground they need the support, but legally it is not possible. So what they do is they are trying to find out some other indirect means of supporting this population in terms of basic services like electrical supply or water supply or even drainage. And then for that, people like us, the NGOs or the informal sector, they are also seeking some support from elsewhere and then providing them. But what we are trying to do is, until and unless these population get the required legal recognition, then they have to be safe enough from disasters. So that's how it's a complex for us to do that. And we are trying to come up with some durable solutions regarding this also, but it was not been so much clearly indicated or useful till now. But we hope from the foreseen urban living lab, we would be able to come up with some creative solutions and durable solutions to these. That's all what I can say now.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, BJ. And I
You're
think
welcome.
you're right. It's a very complex issue, but legal status has to be one of the solutions addressed for displaced populations so they can have access to services. And there is some guidance in the Words into Action on things to consider in that process. You concluded your answer with the Urban Living Labs process, and there's been questions there. What is an urban living lab? Jean, can you hear me? Would you be able to answer that question?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, go ahead. What is an urban living lab?
Yeah, the urban living lab is an action, an event whereby you start by it's a process. By the way, it's a process whereby you engage in most stakeholders, including those most at risk and displaced populations. Those ones from different backgrounds, so they come together and they brainstorm together, they suggest it, they suggest, they innovate, they design together and come up with durable solutions for to address some of the challenges that face these urban areas that have most displacement. So the way you need to understand urban living labs, it's a process. It's a process whereby the real life settings in which participatory research and actions are conducted in order to create innovations, or it might be solutions, services, processes, even products. But there's some of the challenges of those most living in the city. Briefly, that's the urban living lab.
Yeah. Thank you so much for highlighting that again. And to the members listening, we are developing a resource pack on urban living labs so that you can use them for working with displaced populations and other stakeholders affected, but also in other urban scenarios. So we'll be sharing them next year. I hope to have time to squeeze in 2 more questions. The first, if I can ask Shivangi, to what extent can you attribute climate change to displacement? Shivangi, are you able to comment on that one?
Yes, and sorry, I need to keep my video off because of the bandwidth issue right now. I think climate change, we have seen that, it is creating, it is impacting the lives and livelihoods of the people. Food and water insecurity has been one of the major impacts that you find in many of the climate risk hotspot areas. We find lots of internal displacement happening within country. If I have to take countries like India, for example, drought has created that problem. the livelihoods of the people, especially the agriculture, people who are dependent on the agriculture, have to move out of their villages to kind of seek livelihoods, and they then kind of informally settle into the urban areas, and that's what we have discussed. So most of this since last 1 decade and more, what we see is that lots of influx from the rural area to the urban areas, especially for internally displaced people, is because of the impacts of climate change, seeking for a better life and livelihoods.
That's great, thank you. Yeah,
So
sometimes
definitely climate change has become one of the major drivers for displacement. But if you see certain countries where the conflicts primarily, please pardon me, it's
okay.
my puppy at the back. He won't leave me. It's late in the night, so he won't go out of this room, but sorry for that. I think some of these places which are on the border, they kind of have a conflict owing to the sharing of the resources. The resources are less, and there are more people that who requires to be kind of fed into, and that kind of creates a conflict, thereby the displacements happen. So we have many such examples which are happening in Latin America, in African countries in particular, and as well as in Asia. So climate change definitely, Alice, to answer your question, becomes one of the major risk drivers, which leads to forced displacement scenario that we are talking about.
Yeah, that's great. And sometimes climate change can be slow onset, so it builds up over time and then eventually forces people to leave their homes and seek shelter and livelihood elsewhere. And sometimes displacement is caused by climate change that's immediate. So for example, a storm that is big enough to destroy houses, or a flood, and that's due to climate change and forces people to move from home. I guess maybe a final question then. I'd just like to pick up on the question in relation to early warning systems. We haven't spoken specifically about early warning systems, but it's important to think about locations that are at risk of displacement. So if a flood is likely to happen in an area, is that likely to cause houses to be damaged and therefore people to move on? So Sylvie, what role does early warning systems play within this displacement context, and specifically within your words into action approach?
Thank you very much for the question. I used to work exclusively on early warning systems, so I'm very happy for it. In fact, it's definitely in the guidance, and if we know that comprehensive end-to-end early warning systems have to reach everyone, and that means including people that are at risk of displacement and people that are already displaced. And this is a crucial area, a crucial issue. People that are already displaced may not have a legal status, so they might not be known to the authorities, and so the warnings do not reach them. If they reach them, they might be in the wrong language. They might not have the right medium to receive them. Sometimes the warnings are transmitted by cell phone, and a lot of people have cell phones, but maybe if you were displaced, you don't have a cell phone anymore. So there are lots of things to consider in terms of making sure that early warning, that people receive the warning, but very much also that we can do something about is preparing people to respond to the warnings, how to evacuate with dignity, in safety, and those are conditions that we can help prepare people to come to, and that are part of early warning preparedness. So that's definitely in the guidance. It's not, it goes into lots of details because that is a disaster risk reduction measure, and the guidance is already for disaster risk reduction practitioners. So it's not a guide on how to do early warning, but obviously there is a huge link here. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks for highlighting that. And we've put into that link the links to that e-learning system. It was very informative when I did it. I learned a lot about displacement and not just responding to people's needs or trying to build resilience after they've been displaced, but it helps you think through things such as temporary relocation, move if you know a hazard or risk is about to happen, then move people away, and when the risk has passed they then can go back home. That would be managing displacement risks as well. But the link helps you explore all of that in English and Spanish, and as Sylvie said, shortly in French and other languages too. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of our seminar, and I'm sorry I didn't have time to answer more questions. But I just would like to sincerely thank you all for listening in today. Thank you very much to the panelists who were able to join and give their contributions from their experiences. It's been most helpful. Just as a reminder, as final comments, this seminar has been the last one of 2021 for the Local Leadership Academy, but the programme will continue into 2022. Shivangi, who has joined us on this call, will be leading the next seminar on water and food insecurity, and that will take place on Thursday, 25th of January at the same time. And that will also be followed on by webinars on gender inequality and urbanization later in the year. So thank you so much to everyone. And I guess because it's mid-December, begin to enter into the festivities marking the end of the year. So from my hometown, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And for those of you who have different traditions, my best wishes to all of you as well. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much and wish you a very happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.